With that, welcome you inside this week-ending edition of Big Ten Today, presented by Taco Bell. Rick Pizzo, thrilled to be joined by a couple of former coaches, Jerry DiNardo and Dave Wanstead. Jerry, I imagine that this time of the year, you still get fired up for the start of the season, but the feeling is probably a little bit different than when you were actually coaching.
Oh, it's a lot different.
A little less stressful?
Undefeated, yeah.
Always unbeaten.
Always unbeaten. And Coach, it's great to be next to you.
Yes, absolutely. I tell you what, I can't remember a Thursday that had that many big, meaningful games. You know, usually there's one or two on there, it's over. I mean, we're sitting there last night till 11 o'clock at night, and they're playing ball, and it's meaningful football. It was great.
Two missed field goals away from being undefeated.
Yeah.
We could have been 3-0.
League can't go 18-0 this weekend, though. 17-1 would be a pretty good start to the new look Big Ten in 2024. Our big story does recap opening night in the new look league. Speaking of looks, Rutgers certainly looked the part. They're one of the buzz teams right now in college football. Kyle Monungai, Ethan Kaliakmanis, and the Scarlet Knight defense all played a starring role. Monungai 165, Kaliakmanis made all the throws, and that defense shut down Howard 44-7. Illinois also off to a great start. Luke Altmaier nearly perfect through the air. Caden Fagan over 100 on the ground, and the Illini D pitched the shutout. Not as good a Thursday in the Twin Cities. Minnesota twice gave up fourth quarter leads and falling to North Carolina. A couple of missed field goals from the reigning kicker of the year. Gophers did play without star running back Darius Taylor, who was injured late during training camp. All right, let's dive into these games a bit deeper. We start with Illinois, Jerry, and I think it was a question mark for the Illini heading into this year with Luke Altmaier, who had his ups and downs and an injury last year. I know that Eastern Illinois may not be the stiffest opposition that he faces this season, but he looked really good, and he got help from the run game.
Right, not the stiffest opposition, but you look at Illinois' perspective, what could you get out of that game? So I charted the first half. Luke Altmaier threw the ball 24 times, and Illinois ran it 24 times.
Perfect.
I didn't look at the second half. So obviously it was about being balanced. They rushed for over 200 yards. So that's the sweet spot for them. The only thing that you don't really get a good feel about, the pass game downfield, you can get a feel for it. You can't get a feel for how the offensive line did pass pro because they were better than the defensive line of East Illinois. So you come out of it saying, this is who we want to be. If we can play the best teams on our schedule and be 50-50 run pass, it'd be tough to defend.
Absolutely. You know, when you think back when Illinois had the big year a couple years ago with Tommy DeVito, right? He was about, 70% completion ratio, threw like 4 or 5 interceptions the whole year. And last year it was completely opposite. So I was looking at Illinois' defense, and I said, you know, you lose guys like Randolph, who NFL, Johnny Newton, NFL. You know, how are they going to be on defense? Well, and Jerry knows this. It's pretty simple. When you protect the football, your defense is going to play better. When you can run the ball and have completions, your defense is going to play less. They're going to play better. So I think for them to be a good team, they need to keep the balance. Like, Jerry, I agree with you, but then that's going to help this defense as they grow, too.
Well, and you know from your experience, right, as a DC, you mentioned the two guys they lost up front last year. It was a step back defensively. That's because the year prior, they had lost a handful of guys from that secondary that were top-level picks to the NFL. You lose guys who you can just shut down on the outside. It frees up everything. I think year 2 under Aaron Henry, it makes a huge difference for the defense.
No question about it. No question. And, last year was his first year really being a coordinator, calling it. So he knows his strengths and weaknesses as well, the players. I
mean, your major job in coaching is to address last year's issues. And there was no doubt that Brett Bielema is a guy that will address the issues. I'm guessing there was a lot of late nights down in Champaign with this coaching staff. You just get the confidence that he's going to get it fixed. And again, this wasn't a great opponent, but we know they want to be balanced, and we know they want to play good defense, and that's who Brett's been.
And we saw Caden Fagan at spots last year. He is an absolute bull. Kind of running back that you want between the tackles. If you have to wear down the clock, they can do that. Should be an interesting mix between offenses for the Illini with the run and the pass. All right, transition now to Rutgers. This is a buzz team, as I mentioned during the open. They've gotten a lot of hype because of all the experience that comes back for Greg Schiano and the Scarlet Knights. Now, they did lose Mo Toure in training camp for the season, one of their best players in the team, defensive star. But Kyle Monungai is back, Dave. He goes for $165. The question was Ethan Kaliakmanis. He looked really good, made all the throws that they would expect him to make, and the defense did its part against an overmatched Howard team. Greg Schiano said it afterwards. We had a couple of goals in this game. We accomplished all of them, but all it is a start.
Yeah, I talked to Greg last week a little bit, and he, you talk about, there's no question everybody knows Rutgers' identity. Some of these teams, it takes them 3 weeks, and you say, what are they? What are they going to do? Well, Greg established that right off the bat, the way they ran the football with Cow and company. The big question mark on offense, besides that, he was talking about how much can they do with Kirk Soraka, the offensive coordinator, and Ethan being the quarterback. How much can we do offensively from a passing game? And I think he didn't turn the ball over, 150 yards passing. That was a solid performance. They're going to have to score more points. And I'm sure that's what they're looking at. How can we generate more points? Because defensively, the biggest concern and talked about was how much are we going to be able to get pressure with our front guys as compared to how much we're going to have to pressure and blitz. And in yesterday's game, we all saw it. It was close early, and Howard was driving, and they had a critical third down, and Greg turned out of pressure. Right now, a blitz stopped them on fourth down, and that flipped the game around. So the last point I want to make with you is, Rick, is you mentioned the expectations. When you look at Rutgers' schedule, Jerry, there's a talk around there. You wouldn't say that Rutgers has expectations outside the house, but they do.
They do now.
Because of the scheduling and the experience, I think.
They don't feel like they can reach their expectations unless they can throw the ball better than they did a year ago. That's why they made a change at quarterback. And here's the box they're in, and I've been in this box. You're a running team. You're eating up the clock, and you're beating the matchup opponents, meaning that I have as good a personnel as who I'm playing. The issue with winning games like that is it doesn't work when you're playing a better opponent. And as you lay out the schedule, Coach, and as you look at the Rutgers program, what Greg Schiano wanted to do was make the pass game better. The slippery slope is, does it hurt the run game? So you've established that you could beat these 7 teams by pounding the ball, but you can't beat the other ones. And in an attempt to beat the other ones, you want to throw the ball more, but you don't want to throw the ball where it hurts you from beating the guys that you're already beating. And that's where this program is. And the schedule fits perfect into this change in offensive philosophy.
Well, we saw them last year. How many times were they tied at the half? They go ahead of Michigan, right? And then it's tie. And now they have to throw the ball to find a way to score points. Couldn't happen. So it's a good point. I agree with you.
I think they are going to have to throw the ball. They're going to have to throw the ball more effectively, not necessarily more often, more effectively than they did last year with Gavin Wimsatt.
Oh, absolutely.
Baby steps. Baby steps in the pass game. Not big steps.
Not big steps. Just little baby steps on the way. You get there. It may take you a little bit longer, but you'll eventually get there. And you're safer.
That's okay.
On the way to get
Greg's
there.
not going anywhere. He's got all the time in the world.
There was one loss on the Thursday schedule. It was a game that Minnesota probably feels like it should have won, gave up a couple of leads in the fourth quarter, had the chance with some field goals. Now, as I mentioned, they play without Darius Taylor, but Minnesota is still going to try to run the football. That is who they are. And I think a little bit like Rutgers with the transfer quarterback and Max Brosmer, who's probably not going to be a guy who you expect to throw for 250 or 300. This is their DNA. They are going to have to win games that don't get into the 20s.
Right, and they couldn't run the ball. I mean, they had less than 100 yards rushing, and then obviously the missed field goal. But I have to say this, and we talked about this in the green room. P.J. Fleck never brings a flat team to a game.
They played hard.
They played hard, and he's the first one to admit he comes at the game differently and his culture and all that. But, man, those guys played hard. When you look at the defensive line of North Carolina, I mean, those guys were big. They could run. They were really challenged up front, and that's really why they couldn't run the ball. But the 2 missed field goals, especially the last one, if they would have moved, they had a chance to move that ball a little bit on the take a knee. All they had to do was move it that much, take a knee. and that thing would have missed the goalpost.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
They just took a knee right on the snap instead of scooching over a little bit.
And they actually ran a play that way, right? For some reason, it looked like they wanted to get in position there. But yeah, I agree with you with the effort. There was no question who was the more talented team. Yeah. North Carolina was, but the will to win. If they win that game, it's just because of want to and effort. But when I looked at them, it looked like as the game went on, PJ said, "Okay, we're running these gun runs and we're doing all." Let's bring the extra tight end in. Let's get some big people in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And let's do what we do, and let's start pounding the ball. And I'll tell you what, as the game was moving on, they were starting to move that defensive line of North Carolina. And I'll bet you when they watch that film, they're going to say, you know, we got to go back. We know what we are. Let's not kid ourselves and do what gives us the best chance to win. One more point. You know, Joe Rossi. This is the first time. How many years has he been there? I mean, he's a foundational block like PJ, right? I mean, and they got a new defensive coordinator. I thought the guys did a great job. You know what I mean? Because you know how that is. Different personalities. Everybody wants to tweak the scheme. So I was concerned about their defense, but I thought against a talented North Carolina team, they showed up.
I thought Corey Heatherman's unit played pretty well as Rossi now joining the Jonathan Smith staff at Michigan State. I will also give this kind of credit to PJ Fleck. It's one thing that I don't think gets talked about enough. Remember how long it had been before any Minnesota offensive lineman had gotten drafted? And when he got there, they didn't even have enough offensive linemen to scrimmage in the spring. The depth that he and that staff have built on that offensive line is why they can play football like this and why they're going to be in pretty much every game. And that's been the DNA for this program since PJ Fleck arrived in Minneapolis. Michigan State plays host to FAU Friday. You can see it right here. Our pregame coverage begins at 6:30 Eastern. This game marks the opening of the Jonathan Smith era, the first ever career start for QB Aiden Childs, and should answer some of the unknowns surrounding a very different looking green and white.
Walking out on Spartan Stadium is definitely a different feeling.
I'm excited for 75,000 screaming fans. I can't wait for that.
And I have chills going from the crown of my head to the sole of my feet. You know, it just chills. Good chills. It's excitement. It's the readiness to play for the fans.
There goes Carter. Touchdown number 3.
Looking around the entire stadium of 75,000 plus and seeing them shout green or white. It's an amazing, electric atmosphere, and I can't wait to get back out there.
Well, I expect to have some butterflies and some real excitement. Really looking forward to having Spartan Nation out there, the crowd, and counting on the crowd to help us throughout the game.
Today's big stat is brought to you by Walgreens. Shows us that season openers, specifically these Friday night specials, have been very good to Michigan State. Spartans 22-3 overall in their last 25 openers. That includes a perfect 11-0 mark on Friday nights. Michigan State will look very different, and not just because Jonathan Smith is now on the sidelines. Rick Pizzo back with Jerry DiNardo and Dave Wanstead. Aiden Childs comes with him from Oregon State. He'll make his first career start, though, as Smith has pointed out on several occasions, he played in some big moments for the Beavers a year ago, just never as the first guy to take a snap. What are we expecting from Michigan State in this new era?
You know, it's really interesting. The background of Jonathan Smith at Oregon State as it relates to Oregon, and Mark D'Antonio, Michigan State, as it relates to Michigan, it is identical. I mean, he has taken a job that he's already had, just in a different part of the country. He reminds you of Mark D'Antonio, the way he conducts practice and his presence. He's low-keyed. The players told us that he's great in meetings and all that, so it's interesting. He's decided to recruit the way Mark D'Antonio recruited. 300 to 500 mile radius, much different than Mel has. Childs, when you bring a quarterback with you, it helps your install incredibly, right? Because the quarterback knows it's the same offense as we ran at Oregon State, so that's one person. Same terminology. So if one player could come from the same system, you'd want it to be a quarterback. And the last thing I said, we've already mentioned Joe Rossi talking about Minnesota. Hiring Joe Rossi, fabulous defensive coordinator. And every week they're going to say, Joe, what's this stadium like? Or this recruiting area, and so on and so forth. So it was a brilliant move by Jonathan Smith. you get so much, and I think, and the player shared this with us. You get so much confidence being around him. He's not real outgoing, but you know he's in total control, and you know he knows what he wants to do.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned Mark D'Antonio. Now I'm going to date us a little bit here, Jared.
Oh, you're older than I am.
Okay. How about going back?
First time I haven't been the oldest guy on the desk. I'm sorry. Go on.
When was the last time that Michigan State had an offensive coach? George Perlis, defense. Nick Saban, defense. Mark D'Antonio, Mel Tucker. I mean, it's been a while. So, I mean, it's
great point.
A big choice. What was I thinking? Now you got me thinking about my age.
So it's your age.
Okay. When was you born? 61 new players on their football team. Yeah. Okay, that's a lot of turnover. But the one thing that really will help, and I think Michigan State's going to be better than people think, he's not going to have to coach his coaches for the most part. You know, he brings his offensive guys. He's not going to have to coach his quarterback. He brings his quarterback. So the system is in. That's a lot. If you go in new and you hire all new people, that you spend a lot of time.
He has a mix of guys he knows and guys who will help him transition to the Big Ten.
Absolutely. And so I think they're going to be a little bit better. Now, this game against FIU, it's a little
FAU. This is Florida Atlantic. This is Tom Herman.
Tom Herman, Ohio State ex-head coach. You know, being down in Florida and coaching there, this is a school that gets a lot of transfer backs. They can be sneaky good. And from the standpoint, kids leave and go to Florida, it doesn't work out, they come back. Where do they go? A grade lower, FAU. So they get some talent down there. And with Tom Herman, Big Ten, I mean, this is going to be a good game, a real good game, better than people think.
You make a great point, and to me, this is a matchup opponent. Ordinarily, if Michigan State's rocking and rolling and FAU's rocking and rolling, it's not. It shouldn't be, right? And hopefully soon it won't be. But you're right. This is a matchup opponent, and I have to tell you, he's got a lot of work to do on that roster. Jonathan Smith does. I mean, we got to give him some time to build that roster. I mean, this is a program that went through a crisis and different coaches. I mean, it's going to take a little time.
But if you do give him some time, like Mark D'Antonio was given some time, and you made all those comparisons, those results came, and I think they came quicker for D'Antonio, especially against Michigan. Now, to be fair, they had some help with the transition that Michigan went through with their coaching staff, but I think Spartan fans would love to see something similar with Jonathan Smith than they had with Mark D'Antonio. What other name, by the way? Jack Velling, the tight end that also came with Jonathan Smith from Oregon State. He's completely unknown. I think he could be as good as guys like Colston Loveland, Luke Lachey. He is that talented at the tight end position. They'll use him a lot. So Aiden Childs makes his first start for Michigan State Friday night. Tyler Van Dyke, the Miami transfer, makes his first start for Wisconsin. And Dave, this is a guy whose career has been so up and down. His first year at Miami, he was off the charts. People were talking about him maybe being a future Heisman candidate, and then it kind of fell off the planet over 2 years. But Luke Fickell, for the second straight year, says, I want a veteran quarterback. I want a transfer guy. I think this offense depends on Van Dyke because you have a known in Ches Malusi if he stays healthy in the backfield.
Yeah, they were crippled last year. You know, Phil Longo, their offensive coordinator, Luke. I mean, they lost their running backs. They lost a quarterback. I mean, they were really playing with a short stick last year. About a month ago, I talked to Mario Cristobal, the head coach at Miami, who recruited this kid and coached this kid. And he said, Dave, the guy was a Heisman candidate. This is his fourth offensive coordinator in 4 years. New system. This guy wants you to run it a little bit more.
That's crazy.
This guy wants to throw it a little bit more. So Mario was high on the kid. He says, no, but the problem is Mario was getting another offensive coordinator. So he was changing again. And he said the kid really never had a chance to get comfortable and get into a groove. So hopefully, you know, he puts it together quick. And he can play like his ability matches it because he does have ability to make plays.
Well, they better figure it out quick. They have Alabama in the
Yeah, I was going to say, they've got a little bit to go. You know, this is the second year that Fick is learning how to put the offense and the defense together. Fick's not used to the offense that Phil Longo runs. And we talked at camp. He said, you know, I don't get involved. But what I do want to do is I want to be more creative in the run game, which I found very interesting. So he's talking about schemes and that kind of stuff. He's not talking about run-pass ratio. He's not worried about the run-pass ratio. And then when we talked to Phil Longo at camp, he says everyone talks about how much we throw the ball. In all the years, here's what he said, all the years I've been running this offense, I've only passed it 15 more times than I've run it.
He went back and charted every play call he's ever made?
Yes, because people keep saying, they throw the ball, they do both. And some of it is dictated by the defense, obviously.
Sure.
If you're reading a defense, they control whether it's run or pass. So this is going to be an interesting year for Fick, how he can manage the game, because he knows the offense so much better. He says he doesn't get involved, but it's going to help manage it the second year. It's hard being a defensive coach, manager. You know this better than I do. When you have an offensive coordinator like that and you're a defensive coach, I mean, it makes you a little bit nervous that clock's going to stop a lot.
And I think he's fighting it, because I think I might have said it a year ago when Luke took over and he hired Phil from North Carolina, until I looked up the notes and saw that he was balanced at North Carolina. Because my mindset, Paul Chryst, Barry Alvarez, lead the league in possession time, lead the league in rushing and play defense. So I think, at Wisconsin, I can see why he would go back and look at those numbers, because he's probably people are saying, why aren't we running the ball like we used to? So it's...
And to clarify, I'm guessing Phil himself didn't go back. I'm guessing they have somebody on staff that could actually chart that for the coaches. He's got some more important business to tend to, like getting ready for Western Michigan on Friday night. After leading an amazing turnaround at Arizona, Jedd Fisch arrived in Seattle to a completely turned-over Washington roster. The post-coaching change mass exodus meant Fisch had to hit the portal hard, did it mainly in Tucson. And while that means new faces nearly everywhere, the UW headman not shying away from those year-one expectations.
We've had a mock game. We've done we've practiced leaving the tunnel. We've practiced how long it takes for the garage doors to open up and how long the walk is from the locker room to the gate. We've, practiced what music we're going to play after a game. We've tried to emulate and simulate different opportunities during the course of the game. If the headsets go down, what would we do? If the coach, the quarterback communicator, we accidentally we made a substitute and there's no one that has the green dot on defense, right? There's just some things that you have to, practice, that if you were together 3-4 years, maybe you wouldn't have to spend as much time on. But, communication is huge. It's huge for the players. It's huge for the coaches. And it's not just player to player or coach to player or coach to coach. It's all of it. And we've got to make sure we do a really good job of, on Saturday, handling whatever blips on the radar that are going to come, because they will come.
Fascinating to hear Fisch talk about all those details, because that's the word on him, that he has his hand in literally everything that happens with this program. Only Indiana has more transfers on its roster than Washington. Fisch and staff brought in 28 from the portal. That's because just 40% of total production returns from 2023. Huskies open their season Saturday night against Weber State in a game you can see right here on the Big Ten Network. Rick Pizzo back with Jerry DiNardo, Dave Wanstead. You're not starting entirely from scratch, but this is about as close as you can get to starting from scratch. New coach, new league, one starter back, and that's both offensively and defensively for the Washington team that played for the title a year ago.
Well, we got to know Jedd when he was at Michigan and Minnesota in the Big Ten, and he has really developed into a guy that, as we just heard, crosses every T, dots every I. He's doing some really creative things with leadership and culture and that off the field that we all found fascinating. So he's doing as much as he can. You're right, Rick, they have one starter back. He brought 12 with him from Arizona. He's an offensive guy. I always ask head coaches that call the plays, how can you do it? How can you find time? We just saw Ryan Day give it up. Jedd has no design whatsoever to give it up. But the practices were good, physical. The quarterback, Will Rogers from Mississippi State, he gives them a chance. But he calls it a reboot. You mentioned the number of people coming in. He brings 12 guys with him from Arizona. So he doesn't like rebuild. He says this is a reboot. We are really starting from scratch.
Reboot seems to be a really nice way to avoid saying rebuild.
But you know what? They practiced hard. I thought their line of scrimmage was, decent, as good as a lot of the teams in the Big Ten. So he's got a team that can compete without a question, especially with the quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's done a great job, obviously, at Arizona, but he followed the blueprint a little bit like Jonathan Smith. He brought a lot of guys with him. Would you say 28 guys from Arizona?
28 overall, 12 from Arizona.
12 from Arizona. So he's brought almost all the coaches, a majority of the coaches. So he'll save a little bit of time that way from a standpoint of getting things going full speed in the right direction. The quarterback, this Will Rogers guy, he came in from Mississippi State. He set records down there. He has almost every passing record as a senior at Mississippi State before he transferred up there. So this is the difference maybe a little bit than Michigan State is that this guy is a veteran guy, and this guy has played at a high level in the SEC. So if he can get a supporting cast around him and this guy has some success early, it could help this team, as far as getting some wins early and building some confidence.
And he's not afraid to play the motivation card. He had a T-shirt on, something about no respect.
Yeah.
So
he doesn't appear to be afraid of much.
And Pete Carroll was at practice when we were there, and he said Pete doesn't like that I'm doing this motivational stuff. It was really funny.
What does Pete Carroll know?
No.
He hasn't won at any level.
Yeah, it was very funny, but he had this T-shirt on, and he's telling the kids no one's giving us a chance. I mean, he's playing it
Sell
to the
it.
tilt. He's doing it.
Belichick's son, defensive coordinator.
And Carroll's
He brought
son.
in a bunch of NFL guys. That's
Carroll
right.
and Belichick's sons are both there.
Yep. All right, from one team that played for the title to another. Sharon Moore makes his official debut as Michigan head coach coming up on Saturday against a Fresno State team that, by the way, is very familiar with this same scenario because a year ago, Fresno, week one opener, had to hit the road against a Big Ten team. It was Ryan Walters' debut at Purdue, and Fresno scored a couple late to give the Bulldogs the win. Now, Moore is well aware of what this Fresno State program is. A little bit different now after Jeff Tedford had to step aside because of health issues. But this is a team that is always going to play hard. It's a team, Dave, that I don't think you would want on your schedule really at any point in the non-conference. But you get them in week one and you get them for your debut for Sharon Moore. Also with something of a rebuilt roster and a big question, at least offensively, and a big question at quarterback.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Fresno was 9-4 last year, and 2 weeks after they beat Purdue, they beat Arizona State 21-0. So a Pac-12 team. So this is nothing new to these guys. The real key, I think I may be underestimating. The closer you look at Michigan, their front seven could be better than it was last year. They could have, between Graham and Grant, they could have the two people in the NFL are saying these are 2 number 1 draft picks. I mean, so they're going to have obviously a great defense. To me, how is Wink Martindale, their defensive coordinator, how is all that going to work? Wink, NFL reputation.
NFL guy forever.
NFL and pressure. That's all good as long as you can score if you give up a big play. So the balance, you got a young quarterback, right? Or new quarterback. We got a good running game. We got to develop that offensive line. They'll be calling Jerry to get up there. I mean, that's the one area when I look at this team that says how they're going to be may be determined by how quick this offensive line develops. But everywhere else is going to be good. Defensively, though, I go back to that because if they are starting off a little slow with the quarterback, young kid, the defense may have to just play a little bit sounder and not come after people.
Well, you remember early in Jim Harbaugh's career, they had a DC in Don Brown who did nothing but blitz and bring pressure, and that cost them on the outside. I think they probably look a little bit different. And just to clarify, they haven't officially named Orji yet, right? They said he's been in a battle with Davis Warren throughout all of camp. Sharon Moore said, you'll know when we go out to play on Saturday who's going to be the starting quarterback. There are expectations, though, Jerry. Even with all this turnover, they're preseason top 10 in the AP poll.
Yeah, to go back before I go to offense, a young head coach with a strong defensive coordinator, that's tough to manage unless the guy's a team guy. I never thought maybe Don Brown was. Wink isn't. I'm just saying that's a tough thing to manage. The one thing that's also tough to manage is both these quarterbacks, Orji or Warren, are different style. Okay, so that puts you in a box because they both can't run the same offense. Orgy obviously has more of a run threat than Warren does. Perhaps Warren throws it better. I don't know that it's that simple, but it's close to being that simple. And they're not going to announce it until the game day, and I don't blame them for that. The other thing is, first-time head coach, although he's been in the head coaching role, he's going to manage a lot more things now than he did when Jim was still the coach, but he was suspended. He plugged in and played. Now, he's making all these other decisions, and you make one bad game day decision, and it's not a problem until it's a problem. And so this will be a little tougher for everybody in that program because there's so much change.
I'm glad you brought that up. Sharon did an unbelievable job in those games. But to your point, Jim was in the building doing everything other than coaching on Saturday throughout the course of the week. So Sharon was an OC for 5 days and then had to make those decisions on game day with, by the way, a roster that was good enough to win the national championship. Not a lot of folks think that they have that roster this year.
But to go back to your point, Rick, they're a playoff team now.
I think absolutely. Both teams get in.
That's what I was trying. That's kind of what I was leading.
Absolutely.
Do you really think Jim Harbaugh was not in that stadium somewhere when he was?
No.
I am not answering. I plead the Fifth Amendment to that question. Objection, Your Honor. That's a leading question. Better late than never for better communication in college football. 2024 finally marks the debut of headset comms as coaches can send plays directly through the helmets of their quarterbacks and select defensive players. Jerry says, don't worry, you'll still see those crazy signboards with gifs and celebrity pics because coaches do still have to worry about signs being stolen that they are signaling in to other players.
When I got here, my biggest concern for my first 2 weeks on the job, first 2 weeks of February, was how am I going to run this without being able to communicate with the quarterback like we did in Green Bay. And then they passed it. I think I'd rather be lucky than anything. And when they passed, it really took everything out of all the how are we going to signal this in, how are we going to get all these motion input signals to them. And now I can just talk to them. So it was kind of ironic that happened 2 weeks into me getting this job. We have enough to do as far as getting our players doing the things we need to do. So it was good that some of the logistical headaches were erased when they allowed us to do this coach to player communication.
We've been experimenting with multiple people, and so whether it's linebacker or safety, just trying to see, the one thing that we can't simulate is a crowd noise. It's louder on defense, so it's going to be harder for one guy to be yelling out all of the different signals and different communicate there that way. So we've done a lot of different things: signals, hands, pre-snap, during the snap. So we're continuously trying to make that process better.
All right, time now for us to debut Coach Speak. You see Jerry and Dave in their, would I say younger years with that picture? Is that fair?
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys were talking about
tread lightly, but it's probably fair.
Well, Jerry just made such a big point that he's younger than Dave and wanted to make sure that everybody knew. I thought we could revisit that statement. Defensively, it's interesting to hear Tony White talk about that because everybody knows it's the quarterback on offense and the direct communication. Different teams are going to have to decide which player, usually the Mike linebacker, but not always, gets the headset comms for the DC.
Yeah, they could go either way. Let me just go back with this, okay? Because I was coaching the NFL when it started there. Okay, and the thinking behind it was, who's the most important player on the field? The quarterback. So how can we make him more efficient? Okay, let's rather than run guys in or hand signals or signs or whatever, let's communicate the play right to him so he can get it to everybody quicker, more efficient. Because if we're more efficient, okay, it's going to be a better product on TV. I hate coming back to that. It's going to be a better product on TV. And if we're more efficient, we're going to win more games, okay, have a better chance to. So that's kind of how the thing started and thinking behind it back in the day. Now, I got two different scenarios on how it was used. Troy Aikman, he didn't want it. He wouldn't use it. He said, send the play in from the sideline, run a receiver in like they did before Jerry and I were even coaching, run it in from the sideline and tell them to play, and Troy would echo the play to the huddle because he didn't want that in his ear. The other side of the coin, let's go up to Green Bay with Brett Favre and Mike Holmgren. Mike said he would talk to Brent. Brent wanted as much as you can give me. So he calls the play. Brent's walking to the huddle. Okay, Brent, if he gets the play, boom, it's called. He's walking up. If the safety's off the hash, it's going to be cover 2. Get the ball to the tight end quick. That's the other side. Now, when I was a head coach and we were using it from a defensive standpoint, I was never on it, but I would be standing there, the calls made, and at Miami with Zach Thomas as an example. I would say to the guy calling the play, tell Zach, watch the unbalanced there. This is where they like unbalanced line. He would say, check the unbalance. So just there was we used it as a way just to give the players a little bit more information to try to make the game a little bit more efficient.
We're still going to see signals. This doesn't stop signals because the only one that is hearing it on offense is the quarterback. And Tim Lester's point was this. They're a huddle team at Iowa. They're a West Coast offense team. We were a West Coast offensive team in Indiana. The verbiage, it's all Bill Walsh stuff, is long, okay? Yes. So Tim was thinking as he was taking the job at Iowa, how am I going to have all these signals? Because it's longer for me to signal in a play than a traditional spread team. So the first thing is, if you're a non-huddle team, the right guard doesn't know what the play is because the quarterback hears it doesn't mean he knows it. In fact, I think it's going to help the defense more than the offense because the defense can just check cover 2 because the defense responds to the offense. So if I check cover 2, the offense can't check their play and we can't keep going back and forth. I have the last say of it. But if you're talking about technology, the big news is the tablets. That's a game changer. Yeah. That means that if you're a great linebacker coach and you can be on the sideline like Seth Wallace at Iowa and go through the formation and make an adjustment, now that's a game changer. If you're an average coach and you can't teach as fast and all that, yeah. but the comms, I don't think it's a big deal. But these tablets, that's gold. Yeah. I mean, you're watching the play.
Gold, Jerry, gold.
You're watching the play that you just missed the block on.
Yeah.
Or made a block.
Well, the players hope it's the latter as opposed to the former because you get worn out if it's the latter.
The excitement should be about the tablets, not on the headsets.
Yeah, and again, they're trying to. I think it all comes back to trying to be more efficient about the thing, and it's going to take the coaches almost eliminate the stuff. Why you'll have a few guys in the press box, but why are we having these guys up in the press box when I can be talking to the players and see it right here on the field, So it'll make some adjustments going on. I always wanted to be in the box so I could see. Well, we didn't have the tablets back then, Obviously, we waited for the pictures, and if the IT wasn't working good, we didn't get the pictures.
You waited for the guy in the lab to have to dip the picture into the water, hang it up, let it dry. Carrier pigeon brought it to you.
Jake Butt and I did something with the high school coaches at Indiana at the championship game. And it was about tablets and it was about video. The high school coaches in Indiana have had tablets for years. Right. And they also have video. You actually could sit your offensive line down on the sidelines in the state of Indiana 5 years ago and watch the video of the play you just ran. And yet
high schools had headset comms way before college.
Right, we're just getting to it now.
You just brought a story to my mind. I'm a senior at Pitt. Coach Johnny Majors is my coach. And we play our first game. Tony Dorsett's the back. And we play the first, and we go in at halftime. And I hear our offensive coordinator and Coach Major saying, offense, I want everybody in the weight room. And we walk in the weight room, it's dark. All of a sudden, someone flicks that thing. And there's the first half. Our first half. I'm looking at myself there. This was back in the 70s. I mean, I'm saying, oh, my God.
You don't mean that Coach Major stretched the rules, do you?
I'm telling you, we would watch the first half in the weight room.
The technology in stadiums is a little bit more advanced these days. Stadiums like the one in Vegas, where USC opens its season against LSU on Sunday. Want to talk about a guy who's known as a great play caller in Lincoln Riley. He'll be using those comms with a new quarterback in Miller Moss. This is a show-me game right off the bat for USC. Show me what you can be without Caleb Williams in 2024.
Yeah, both of these, absolutely, but both of these teams are very similar. You mentioned Lincoln Riley, a great play caller. Brian Kelly at LSU, the last 2 years, both of these guys' offenses have averaged about 40 points a game. Both of them had number 1 draft picks at quarterback that are gone, right? Caleb Williams and Hayden Daniels at LSU, same. Both of their quarterbacks are going to be starting in this game. We saw Nussmeier. He played against Wisconsin in the bowl game was the MVP.
Miller Moss was awesome for USC's bowl game.
Miller Moss throws 6 touchdowns, 6 in his bowl game. So, I mean, there's a lot of similarities to this, and both of them have new defensive coordinators. I mean, USC's defense last year, guys, and I coached defense there. They gave up the most points per game in any defense in the history of USC. So they made a change there. I mean, that should never happen. And LSU was second in the SEC giving up points last year, so they made a change. So from a coordinator standpoint, a quarterback standpoint, both these teams are ranked, right? I mean, USC 23rd or whatever they are.
Yeah, LSU
13. So, there's expectations with both of them. I mean, this should be a heck of a football game. And, we'll see how it unfolds.
Sunday night in Vegas.
Sunday night.
Yeah, I don't know much about LSU, about personnel and that, but out Southern California, you get a feel that this is a really offensive-driven program. And it makes sense because Lincoln Riley's coaching the quarterbacks and he's coaching the offense. So you leave there saying, now Coach Lynn on defense, who, by the way, he was playing at Penn State when the network first started. Now he's
again speaking about us being old. Thank you, Jerry. You keep getting back to this over and over.
Jerry coached against him, right?
He's the defensive coordinator. He was a student athlete.
I know, at Penn State.
Before we had this new studio. But to complement the offense, the Coach Lynn on defense and the special teams, it's got to be a complete package. Brian Kelly doesn't coach offense or defense. And so, you walk away from USC thinking, is this going to be Ryan Day a few years down the road where you have a monster program that can win national championships be in the national championships year in and year out? Can you do that and still call plays?
And for Big Ten fans who haven't had the chance to see Zachariah Branch yet, kick returner extraordinaire as a youngster, going to get used a lot more this year in the pass game, maybe on jet sweeps, one of the most dynamic players in all of college football.
Big Ten Today is sponsored by Taco Bell.
This is so fantastic. The statue of Archie Griffin has been unveiled outside the Horseshoe, commemorating the 50th anniversary of his first Heisman, a legend on the field and truly off the field, one of the nicest guys you will ever meet and an amazing representative for Ohio State and college football as a whole. Coming up tonight, a new era of Big Ten volleyball underway with a marquee matchup between 10th-ranked Oregon and number 4 Pitt. Our live coverage begins at 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific, only on the Big Ten Network in the Fox Sports app. Our countdown to kickoff presented by Taco Bell, now just a few days away from getting things started on campus at Northwestern. With Ryan Field under construction, the Cats open against Miami at Lakeside Field at Martin Stadium. Kickoff set for 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 local, right here on the Big Ten Network. As you take a look at the Saturday slate here on the network, a half dozen games from morning time, Central Time Zone, all the way until Big Ten After Dark out west. Multiple shifts as we get you covered week 1 inside the Big Ten in earnest on Saturday here on the Big Ten Network. One of those night games, Jerry, in Eugene, where Oregon starts a year in which many believe it will be in the national championship game.
Has as much talent as anybody in the conference, including Ohio State. You only can play 11 at a time, so who's deeper, different positions may vary. One may have the advantage. Dylan Gabriel, 6-year quarterback. I mean, he puts the finishing touches on their offense. Their line play is talent, but a little bit young. And so early in the season, as they get better, they'll have as good a line of scrimmage as anyone. Remember the narrative about the Pac-12 teams not being as strong at the line of scrimmage. Yeah. Washington won the Joe Moore Award last year for the best offensive line. So that's all nonsense about the line play. This Dan Lanning, he's got it going.
I was just about to ask you, how many coaches have you encountered at his age that are more impressive, not just wins and losses, but with the way he handles himself surrounding everything surrounding him and the program?
I'll see that and I'll raise you this. He was a defensive coach. When was the last time defensive coaches were hired at a place, especially at Oregon, that has been known since Chip Kelly was there for their explosive offense? He's as talented as any coach I've ever been around.
Maybe the most intriguing game of the weekend, Dave, at least it's one for me, is Penn State, West Virginia. I know this is not supposed to be a great West Virginia team. Tough place to play. And a game where a lot of Penn State folks are saying, show me what Drew Aller can do. Let this guy throw the ball down the field.
Yeah, the West Virginia West Virginia Penn State game, this is West Virginia's third most played opponent. West Virginia, Pitt #1, Syracuse 2, and West Virginia. So, I mean, this is nothing new. This is going to come down to play calling, in my opinion. When you look at Penn State's team, obviously we know about the quarterback and the running backs and the nucleus of the offensive line. Defensively, they've got as good a front seven as anybody in the conference. New defensive coordinator in Tom Allen, new offensive coordinator. How are the players adapting to their style? Is there going to be tweaks in the system? To me, that's what I want to see on film. Are they going to just duplicate what they did or tweak it, and how the player's going to be able to handle it?
Not a great game. Not a great schedule move right here.
Oh, great game, but I think it's not exactly the one that you want to open your season if you're James Franklin and Penn State. Now, you win. You wake up Sunday morning, you feel terrific. You have a Power 5 victory in the pocket. For Dave Wanstead and Jerry DiNardo, I'm Rick Pizzo. Enjoy Week 1 of Big Ten football.